Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K.R. Rammohan, Associate Professor, Head Department of Anthropology, Sikkim University. Today we are going to talk a module on the contributions of M.N. Srinivas, S.C. Dube and L.P. Vidyarthi. This module comes in the paper Theories and Methods in Social and Cultural Anthropology. So before we go to this module, let us see what are the objectives and learning outcomes. To study the contribution of these eminent anthropologists, the contributions of M.N. Srinivas, the contributions of S.C. Dube, the contributions of L.P. Vidyarthi, the life history of these anthropologists, and to know the theories and concepts propounded by these anthropologists. So the most famous in contemporary Indian anthropology which comes to mind is M.N. Srinivas. Born in 1916, survived till 1999. M.N. Srinivas is basically remembered and most often is associated with concepts like Sanskritization, Westernization and secularization. These three concepts are basically come under how social groups, societies undergo the process of social change. M.N. Srinivas also very much interested the studies on village or village studies. He propounded this concept called the dominant caste. What makes a caste dominant in a given particular place? And how a particular caste mobilizes itself in terms of vertical and horizontal solidarity. So when it comes to social change, the principle or the main important aspect M.N. Srinivas proposed is the concept of Sanskritization. M.N. Srinivas has proposed this concept of Sanskritization in his book, The Religion and Society Among Coorgs of South India. Srinivas wants to discuss the process of social change occurring among the low caste Hindus and other groups towards upward direction. Because if we take all the caste groups in a given social space, in a given village, these caste groups are hierarchically placed for certain reasons, whether it is historical, whether it is perceived. But the objective reality is that every caste has its own status, and people know what caste status they have, and your interactions are centered around these social status based upon your caste identities. Occupations are attached to caste groups. Now, Srinivas wants to study in which direction these caste groups are want to change themselves for this mobility. So Srinivas attributes that in order to claim a higher position in a caste, for example, like the Brahmins. So Brahmins are considered to be ritually pure and they are positioned in the highest rung of the social order. Now, how can a low caste status, a particular group wants to change his status? How does it possible? By birth, one individual is being born in a particular caste. How can one change the caste? One cannot change the caste, but one can imitate how the upper caste is behaving, how the ritually superior, high ranked caste are socially conducting themselves. So, if one tries to imitate by moving upward, just by imitating how they are doing, we cannot change the status, but at least we can change the occupation, we can change certain eating habits, we can change certain dressing pattern, so that we could be in that company of that social category. Now, this process involves a change in custom, rituals, ideology, dietary habits, and you have to abandon your occupational habits. The most common example we can see readily in Indian villages is some of the backward castes wearing the sacred thread, and some of the backward caste people following or imitating rituals followed by the upper caste. So what does it make sense? So it gives a picture that the other group is also following what we are doing. So in the eyes of the other community, people start looking at them and say that this people might have been belong to that category. So one wants to wish this change. They don't want to remain in the lowest rungs of the social order. Changing the dietary habits, eating vegetarian food, following the Brahmin rituals, so that one can get an image that we are the cleanest caste. So M.N. Srinivas thought that this process involves the imitation because one has to improve their social order within the social structure. But this can be only done by altering the polluting things that peoples have in mind. Another significant concept which is given by M.N. Srinivas is the concept of westernization. Now, when we go back and see how the Sanskritization process, Sanskrit or Sanskriti, that these people have this culture, let us imitate that culture rather than our culture. On the other hand, M.N. Srinivas wanted to see how under British rule, Indian society has progressed, or what kind of social processes have taken place and changes inflicted by the British rule and governance. The changes that occurred in various attributes, namely technology, new institutions have come up, changing in ideology and certain belief systems. So westernization brought changes within the framework of Indian tradition. But westernization did not take place exactly what happened in the Europe, where there is a complete collapse of the traditional values and systems. But westernization has taken a very long time to get incorporated into Indian society, because the structural features were very, very strong enough to resist the alien culture into Indian system. So most of the social systems are intact, despite the technological changes have come in place, despite there are new institutions have come in place, despite there are certain economic reforms were taken place. But the core of the system did not alter due to strong cultural forces operated within the Indian society. But one form of social practice, example sati, was completely banned due to sincere efforts of many social reformers in India were of the opinion that the practice of sati is dehumanizing and women deserve a dignified place in the society and this should be abolished. So with all these efforts, with the help of British administration, sati was completely abolished. Now M.N. Srinivas focused more on to look into the village social structure, the rural social structure. And he wants to see how a village operates on its own, how a village becomes sustainable, how a village maintains its internal cohesion. So Srinivas thought that village as the microcosm of the Indian society and the civilization. Gandhi said that India lies in the villages. If you want to study India, first we have to study the villages. If you look the village, village is the mirror of India. And why village is very important? Because of its rural social structure, its economy, its religion, its kinship systems, interpersonal relations within the caste groups, and how the traditional composition of India's tradition is still maintained over centuries. So Srinivas viewed that village as a vertical entity which consists of several horizontal layers. And these horizontal layers are nothing but caste. Srinivas is best remembered and best appreciated because of his famous book, The Remembered Village. And Srinivas talks about in this book about the social economic changes, which he calls the model village as Rampura. Srinivas proposed a very interesting and important concept called dominant caste. So Srinivas was interested how a particular caste becomes dominant in each village. Srinivas developed this concept while he was studying in the village Rampura and published a paper on dominant caste in Rampura. According to him, a caste becomes dominant because it has numerical strength. If it has numerical strength, all people gather and they claim that they control certain things and have economic power through ownership of land, or they are holding the political power and a high place in local hierarchy in the village community. So if a caste ranks low in the social hierarchy, it can still become dominant ruling caste or a group in a village because if it is numerically large. For example, any lowest caste which do not have any ritual status, which do not have any land, which do not have any political power, they can still become dominant because of their numbers. And at the same time, sometimes a caste becomes dominant because it owns land and the land is controlled and people are working under this land. Or sometimes a caste becomes dominant because it has political power, where the administration is in the control of this numerically less caste group. So in this way, M.N. Srinivas has proposed that a caste can become dominant by any of these features. Not necessary that caste has to be ritually pure. So in this way, we can understand how the dominant caste plays a vital role in the settlement of village disputes, even for the non-dominant caste groups, because it is the social group which controls everything, and the other caste groups must be obliged because either of their numerical strength, or if they have lots of economic power, or they are holding the political power. These things influence any caste group to take control things in that given village setup. Now, M.N. Srinivas was very interested to see how this vertical and horizontal caste solidarity takes place. M.N. Srinivas viewed that some common cultural elements were shared by all castes residing in a particular locality, either from the highest to the lowest. For example, Brahmins and Harijans of a particular area may use the common dialect and share common beliefs and ideas. In that sense, M.N. Srinivas says this is a unity of caste only at a vertical solidarity. But while the same Brahmins in this village and Brahmins from other villages in other geographical area share some common Sanskritic elements, they have horizontal solidarity. People call themselves by each other. Oh, you are from my caste, you are from my caste. No matter geographically you are deep down in the south and you are deep up north in India. So there is a common thread passing through these caste groups. This Srinivas says that this vertical solidarity is very loose. Vertical solidarity is not that much bonded, but horizontal solidarity is very strong because people share the common Sanskritic elements among its members. Marriages takes place among its members. Caste organizations takes place among these members. Political alliances takes place among these horizontal networks, not in the vertical networks. So this kind of networks and this kind of solidarity bondings gives us clues that how people identify themselves and interactions takes place at a given caste social identities. Let us understand the significant contributions by Shyamcharan Dube, very influential in Indian anthropological thought and his contributions. Born in 1992 and survived till 1996. So Dube's contributions are basically in the village studies, community development programs, political anthropology, and family planning research. Dube's works on village studies are significant in its own term. In his book Indian Village, Dube elucidates the complete study of a village called Shamirpet. In that time it was Hyderabad in Telangana. The book presents adequate information about the historical, geographical, and political background, along with the social and economic religious practices of this village. Now, Dube's main aim was to present a clear picture of what does an Indian village life looks at. And Dube used specifically the structural functionalist approach. in his village studies. He stated that economic system of rural India is based on occupational mobility, interdependence, and a caste functional specialization. That means how a particular economy is being so stable without any major changes. That he ascribed, perhaps this could be the caste identities with their own traditional occupations, and it has been in place for longer times. And Dube emphasized that caste ranking in village mainly relies on rituals and not on economic system. This concept has been also been shared by many other anthropologists, that the concept of purity and pollution, family ceremonies, village ceremonies, communal festivals, where people come together and they have this shared feeling. And for the first time, Dube noticed that there is an interaction between two religions, groups, Hindus and Muslims, in these festivals. Another significant approach towards village studies is the community development programs, was extensively studied by Dube. Dube in his book, India's Changing Villages, Human Factors in Community Development, explains the impact of community development programs or CDPs on Indian villages. And Dube strongly emphasized the importance of human elements in the community development. That means community development cannot develop on its own or per se. Human beings have to be involved consciously, and this agent is required. So Dube evaluated the changes and problems emerged from these programs and found out that Indian bureaucratic system, which is full of red tapeism, is a major hurdle to promote community development programs. Unless one cannot become flexible with the bureaucratic system in India, what we call red tapeism, community development programs cannot flourish. At each and every stage, it is being blocked by too much of bureaucracy. The other important contribution by Dube is towards political anthropology, studies in political anthropology. In one of his papers, Dominant Caste and Village Leadership, Dube suggested that political power was restricted to only few individuals rather than diffused to many people, and it is only in the with particular caste. Whereas Srinivas considered the concept of dominant caste pivotal in evaluating the power relation in rural social life, Dube disagreed from Srinivas in a view that dominant caste cannot operate if they are numerically large, but still the numerically less high caste will also prevails. Not necessary that the low caste people with large numbers can still control the village. He disagreed with that. So in each village there are some few dominant individuals who controls the entire political system, and the political participation is highly limited because they belong to certain caste. And Dube's significant work is also on family planning research. In one of his monographs on family planning, Dube studies the diffusion of how this IUCD, this intrauterine contraceptive device, which is placed for women in controlling family planning. The study emphasized that a necessity to develop a criteria to measure variables related to the general background including the life orientation and lifestyles of the respondents. That means that this IUCD programs for women cannot force. Before taking this IUCD programs to the villages, the policy planner should understand whether the family members are ready to take up this or not. And why do they go for family planning? Why do they want to restrict themselves with only 1 or 2 children? Why do they want many children? So in that aspect, Dube was suggesting the policy planners, without understanding the culture of that people, why, whether they take it or not, if they take it, why, whether it is useful or not, one has to give a lot of importance. Otherwise, this whole program is meaningless. Let us understand the significant contributions of Professor Lalita Prasad Vidyarthi, also called as LP Vidyarthi, born in 1931, survived till 1985. One of LP Vidyarthi's famous works immediately comes to the mind is the sacred complex, nature man spirit complex, tribal and folklore study, and issues related to applied and action anthropology. LP Vidyarthi is very famous for his works on sacred complex. So Vidyarthi conducted an extensive study of the sacred city of Gaya and developed the concept that this place is considered to be as a sacred complex, which Vidyarthi described in a renowned book called The Sacred Complex in Hindu Gaya. So Vidyarthi suggests that the sacred complex has 3 basic components. The one is the sacred geography, that this place is a holy place. A set of sacred performances are there. The performances are very ritually special, and the sacred specialists. With these things, the sacred geography, the sacred performances, and the sacred specialist, which comprises, according to Vidyarthi, is the sacred complex. So sacred complex presented a picture of national unity and denoted an integrated pattern, as it served as a merging point for different traditions, castes and cultures. So in that sense, he thought that this has a very functional value to uphold the traditions in maintaining certain integrity where all people can come. Hence it remains an important place to understand, to see how this dissemination of knowledge and cultural practices are taking place. Another important concept proposed by LP Vidyarthi is nature man spirit complex. While studying the Saurparya Malers of Shahibganj district, he described this complex phenomenon called nature, then man, then the spirits associated in that place. So Vidyarthi basically employed a methodological framework to examine how the tribal lifestyle from the focal point of ecological setting, that is nature, and the social institutions created by man, and the spiritual world, that is the spirit. So all these 3 components, nature, geographical level, man, culture, institutions, all the social organization, and the religious spiritual world. Vidyarthi is also famous for his tribal and folklore study. Vidyarthi's book titled The Cultural Contours of Tribal Bihar throws a significant light upon various aspects of social institutions, of the tribes of Chotanagpur. The book Tribal Cultures of India, along with B.K. Roy, provides a comprehensive information on folklore, art, the course of life, the matrilineal and the polyandry of tribal India. Why certain tribes still follow matrilineality and why certain tribes follow polyandry. So thus Vidyarthi collected valuable information and analyzed this folklore of Malayer associated with their ecological setting, the family structure, the economic organization, the religious practice with their cultural history. And he has also taken interest in the folklore of Maghi and Bhojpuri tribal zones of Bihar. Notwithstanding these tribal studies, L.P. Vidyarthi is also very famous for his contributions to applied and action anthropology. Vidyarthi extensively worked out issues concerned with applied anthropology and action anthropology. In 1967, a task force was appointed on him to study the effects of various kinds of developmental planning for tribal population. With that, he could have formulated many tribal welfare schemes, which are particularly suited to their own culture. With this, he has culminated a book called Applied Anthropology in India. Now, we have understood and got insights into three thinkers in Indian anthropology. The first one is M.N. Srinivas, for his significant contribution on the concept of Sanskritization, the concept of Westernization, how societies become dominant, in particular rural social structure, and we have seen the typology given by M.N. Srinivas. And the contributions given by S.C. Dube, while not completely agreeing with M.N. Srinivas with the concept of dominant caste, his focus is more on how certain developmental programs will be failed if you don't take the local perceptions and their culture. And we have seen L.P. Vidyarthi's contributions towards two important concepts on sacred complex, nature man spirit worship, and L.P. Vidyarthi's significant contributions towards applied and action anthropology.